welcome you to this 28th Bob Marley lecture. In 1997, when I conceived the lecture series, I could never have anticipated that almost 30 years later we would be still going strong. But it is a comment on the commitment of the academic community at the University of the West Indies to recognize the value of popular culture, particularly reggae and dancehall, which have gone global. If you want to hear the full story of the Reggae Studies unit that established the Bob Marley lecture, I invite you to go and get a copy of the Global Reggae book. It's the proceedings of the Global Reggae Conference we had, and these are the plenary lectures. Now, when I conceived this lecture, my vision was that it would give us a sense of the academic integrity of scholarship on popular music. And the first lecture was given by Professor, at the time, Dr. Louis Chudisoki, and his lecture was brilliant. It was called Dr. Satan's Echo Chamber, Reggae, Technology, and the Diaspora Process. And it signified the breadth of my vision of what our Bob Marley lecture should be. Because though the lecture series was named in honor of Bob Marley, it was not supposed to be hagiography, you know, an annual celebration of just Bob Marley. Although, of course, Bob Marley could be the subject of some of the lectures, as in today's lecture, which I'm very much looking forward to, by Associate Professor Ramoupi, who is going to be talking about revolutionary music and cultural resistance, the power of Bob Marley's songs of freedom on Robben Island, maximum security prison in South Africa, during the apartheid era, 1960 to 1991. And I just want to share the titles of some of the other earlier lectures that we had. I'm in the process of editing a selection of these lectures for publication. One of the problems is that every year you have another lecture, so where's the cutoff point? But I'm going to have to establish some boundaries. So the next lecture was by Professor Gordon Roller, Me and the Music, a personal encounter with ska, rocksteady, and reggae. Then Omar Davis gave an unexpected lecture on the forgotten contribution of Peter Tosh. People assumed that you couldn't be talking about Peter Tosh in a Bob Marley lecture series because they didn't understand what the series was about. And we have copies of that lecture on sale. They're only $500. We couldn't produce them for $500 now, so that's a huge bargain. Patricia Anderson gave one of the most inspiring lectures in the series, using the title of one of Marley's songs, using for the title of the lecture an excerpt from one of Marley's songs, In a Government Yard, the challenge of community and housing in Kingston's inner city. Then Professor Frederick Hicklin, psychiatrist, also gave a brilliant lecture, which we called We Never Know We Would Have Reached This Far. I suggested that title, which was a song lyric from one of the DJs, We Never Know We Would Have Reached This Far. There's just a sense of what music and celebrity can do. We never know we would have reached this far. And the subtitle was A Psychological and Psychohistoriographic Analysis of Stardom in Jamaican Popular Culture. Dr. Donna Hope gave an interesting lecture, The Fool Has Never Been Told, Exploring Dancehall's Moral Conscience. And our own Jelani Naya, who is here, spoke on One Love, Bob Marley and Rastafari in the New African Millennium. I'm just going to give you two more. This is just to whet your appetite so you can look out for the book. For the record, Bob Marley's Island Albums and the 40th anniversary of Catch a Fire was another brilliant lecture by Professor Michael Lane. And Cindy Breakspear gave a lecture called Beauty and the Beast. In a newspaper column about the lecture, I said, Beauty and which beast? you know, in my mischievous way. So that just gives you a sense of some of the Bob Marley lectures over the last almost 3 decades. And as we come together to celebrate reggae music as an academic enterprise, I hope you will enjoy today's lecture. Now, the program will run unannounced so that I don't have to be getting up and down every minute. So the next item will be the welcome by Dr. Dave Goss, the director of the Institute of Caribbean Studies, within which the Reggae Studies Unit is located. I should tell you a little politics. I was hoping so many years ago to extract the Reggae Studies Unit from the ICS. I put it there initially because I thought, well, let it be a place for it to grow. And as it grew, it became impossible to extract it because the ICS realized how valuable it was. And so that was one of the battles in the university that I lost. But anyhow, we are still here, Reggae Studies Unit, still going strong, celebrating this lecture series. And another plug I should make is that the Reggae Studies Unit established the degree program in Entertainment and Cultural Enterprise Management, which was captured by the ICS, but that's another story. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I guess I am the capturer. All right. Distinguished face-to-face and online members of our audience, our guests, fellow colleagues, students, lovers of reggae music, and friends who understand the liberating power of our music and its role in cultural resistance. Good evening. It is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome you to the 28th Annual Bob Marley Lecture hosted by the ICS and the Reggae Studies Unit at the University of West Indies here at Mona. This annual gathering is not just an academic tradition, but a testament to the enduring power of Bob Marley's music and message, which continues to resonate across generations and borders. One of my colleagues has recently informed me that with the successful release of Bob Marley's One Love biopic, the online interest in Bob Marley has exponentially soared to the extent that he is, or will be shortly, the most known Jamaican internationally, surpassing Usain Bolt. Our brother Bob, and that's Jelani, by the way. If I'm wrong, it's William Jelani, right? Our brother Bob, inspired by his deep Rastafari faith, has produced a catalog of music that both comforted the comfortless and disturbed the comfortable. Lest we forget that Marley's 1979 survival album with songs such as Zimbabwe, Africa Unites, Survival, and So Much Trouble was banned in South Africa. In such a context, we are privileged tonight to have Associate Professor Neo Ramoupi joining us virtually from South Africa. Dr. Ramoupi should have been here in Jamaica a few days ago, but due to an emergency, he was unable to leave South Africa. I'm sure we're all aware with President Trump's alleged new world order. We are experiencing a very interesting time in our history. I don't know how many of you are aware, but as they speak, the relationship between the United States and South Africa is actually strained at this time. Nevertheless, Dr. Ramoupi brings invaluable insight into the intersection of music, resistance, and liberation, and we eagerly anticipate knowledge and perspective that he will share. We're also pleased to welcome our dean, our hardworking dean, Professor Sylvia Cohenberg, our moderator, Professor Emerita Carolyn Cooper, other distinguished members of academia. We also have Professor Ramsey Paulette Ramsey, Emerita Paulette Ramsey here, fellow heads, Vivette Milson-White, Patrick Pendergrass, and Julian Cresser from HODs in our faculty. We want to welcome them. And me, I can call him mate. Sorry, I want to welcome the head of the Department of Modern Languages, and get in trouble if I I got much of the trouble already. So forgive me, please. We are pleased to welcome our distinguished members of academia, other face-to-face members from our community, academic community, friends, colleagues, honorary music. We have an electrifying performance that will breathe new life into Marley's timeless message. We extend a heartful welcome and appreciation to Sylvester Small, one of our honorary lecturers, a renowned guitarist and one who is well known across Jamaica and the international community. His artistry will set the tone for tonight's proceedings. And he is accompanied by fellow musicians, and they will be reimagining and rearranging Exodus to make this year's lecture even more dynamic. We are especially honored to be celebrating this year's lecture during the 75th anniversary of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, a faculty deeply committed to the study, preservation, and elevation of Caribbean culture, history, and identity. You can give a clap, bigger clap, man. Thank you very much. This milestone is a testament to the enduring commitment of our faculty to fostering critical thought and creative expression. As we reflect on Marley's legacy, let us remember that his music was never passive. It was a rallying cry for the oppressed, or as Rastas would say, down pressed, a balm for the wounded, and a beacon of hope for those surviving for freedom. It remains as relevant today as it was decades ago. With that, I welcome you once again to an evening of learning, reflection, and powerful artistic expression. May Bob's music continue to inspire us to fight for justice, unity, and liberation. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon. This is where, okay, thank you. Good afternoon, friends and colleagues online and friends and colleagues in the live audience. It's great to see so many people in the room, actually. So I'm here as the Dean of Faculty of Humanities and Education. I'm only going to speak very briefly, but it occurred to me that the abolition of apartheid in 1994 predates the birth of many of those present here. How many in this audience were not yet conscious in 1994? Yeah, there's a few. And so what does apartheid mean to those who did not live, through that era? Because I well remember the boycotts and the marches and the excitement of Mandela's release from Robben Island prison, and the further excitement of, the prospect that apartheid was going to be finally abolished. Never mind that we're now going to be entering a new era of global apartheid, it seems, yeah. So this is a lecture that promises not only to speak in an important way to Bob Marley's music and his impact, but to a history that we must not forget. And with that, on behalf of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, I welcome you to this lecture.
Thank you. I want to start first by greeting you in the name of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie I and Empress Menen, and to introduce myself, Jalani Naya. I am being, thank you. I am being asked to facilitate a fireside chat with that's such the right answer, Clyde Williams, honorary lecturer in the Institute of Caribbean Studies. Clyde Mackenzie. I'm sorry. Yeah, man. Well, it's one of those public personalities that we know in media. Clyde is well known to many persons as a cultural analyst, a musicologist, brainchild behind one of the most successful radio innovations we've had and continue to have in various ways. I'm talking about IRI FM, where people didn't think that reggae music could do full-time, and I know that Clyde was a part of that team that not just proved that wrong, but made it successful and a big model. Clyde, welcome. Please give him a round of applause. He's finally joined us in the department as an additional resource for students. Clyde, I have a confession to start out with, which I want to throw to you. As much as I seem old enough to have appreciated Bob Marley, it wasn't until he died in 1981, I was then a student at Wolmer's in fourth form, that I really stopped to think about him. In 1976, I was at the Smile Jamaica concert and didn't even understand the significance of that because I was just taken by my father. So my question to you is, you know, you've become a very important translator of what is significant in our culture. To what extent would you say Bob Marley helped to shape who you are or inspire you in the kind of direction you've taken?
I think, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jelani. I think it is important for us to appreciate that Marley was like the natural mystic. He was everywhere. You felt him. You knew that he was around. And he could not be ignored. I was in high school when you had the two major concerts, Smile Jamaica and One Love. But the thing is, he had already made an enormous impression on me at the time. Now, many people, the dean spoke about apartheid and how many in the audience would not have been familiar with the kind of evil and that prevailed then. And I think when we talk about Marley, I mean, most of us seem to see him in a more saintly term, or they see him as somebody who has been canonized. But in my early youth, that was not the prevailing situation. He was condemned, criticized, ostracized. I mean, I grew up with some Rasta men, you know, from very early. And most of them were not really favorable to Bob's music. They weren't favorable to reggae because most of these people were musicians too, but they loved jazz. And some of them were not in favor even of dreadlocks. These were Rasta men. But they would tell you that it is improper for a man to grow his hair long. So, in other words, there was resistance in and out for Marley. But he prevailed, and his success internationally validated him here to a large extent because people started to understand that his message was resonating, that people outside of the country were actually appreciating his impact. And so there was nothing else to do. So even those people, some of his harshest critics, realized that you couldn't fight against him. You're going to be tired for seeing face. And I think the lesson I perhaps would carry away from Marley's life is that you can make an impact despite the odds when you believe in yourself. It was clear that Marley had a vision of where he was going. He understood his mission. And even with the detractors, he was able to say, well, I am pushing on. You can't deter me from going where I want to be. And I think that's the important message, because his life was not one that you could say was an easy one. It was not an easy road for him. He was a half caste in the Jamaican parlance, he was neither one nor the other. And that in itself posed its own challenges. Of course, I think the breadth of his experience, he was rural and urban, made him somebody who could really resonate with all spheres of the society. And that not only had an impact locally, but internationally, because he was able to appeal to the rural and the urban. He was able to fuse the sacred with the secular, which is an important thing. I mean, I don't know of many people who have been able to forge the secular and the sacred in a way that he and the Wailers were able to do. And that is a distinctive feature of the Wailers' music. And I think that is an important part of their lasting appeal. So, yeah.
You know, I'm listening to you and your clarity on Marley, you know, as a bald-head man. So
I like that designation.
well, what I'm saying
no,
is
I
that,
know, I'm just teasing.
Yeah,
Yes.
somehow he transcends that for you, and you're able to see him in his own right. I saw where you joined in that conversation about Icon and the kind of the national ambiguity around what to designate Bob Marley. You know, clearly he's not a hero, and what from what you've written seems to not be a challenge for you in perceiving him in this way. I like one of the key statements from the article where you say heroism is not by accident, you know, as one of the ways of defining the work of the hero. So in reflecting on that, help us to understand what is the resistance to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I believe that there is a classic definition of heroism. Now, whether we adhere to that as a country is a matter of choice. I believe that what is important is that however you designate your heroes or your icons, that there should be clarity. One of the big problems I have with how we have been given awards in Jamaica is that it seems to be without rhyme or reason. There are people who have lofty titles, national honors, and some people question it. And there are those who you know should have been there, and they don't have any. Now, you want to interrogate the criteria for that. And so what I was talking about, I was saying that in Jamaica, there is the cry for Marley to be a hero, to be a hero. Now, I stated what I thought was a classic definition of a hero, which is a hero for me is not something that is accidental. I mean, so if somebody comes and attacks my sister and I defend her, that's bravery. I don't think it's heroism. For me, heroism is purposeful. So you submit to a cause that is bigger than yourself. Nelson Mandela is clearly a hero because he subscribed to a vision that was bigger than himself, and he was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. Now, heroism for me, in terms of the classic definition, is supposed to satisfy those two imperatives. You know, you should be willing to give your life, and it should be for a cause that is bigger than yourself. Now, different countries can employ different definitions. I mean, I've seen countries within the region who have elevated individuals to national hero status who are not on the same pedestal as Bob Marley. So it is not a question of whether he should be a hero here. It is what method are we going to adopt in order to confer such a designation on him. And that to me comes from what I consider to be the philosophical confusion with the heroism. Now, the other thing, I know that there was a recommendation that a national icon would have been the honor that would have been bestowed on Bob Marley. But when I looked at it, the icon was secondary to the hero, you know, in the iconography. So if you start contemplating that, a lot of people who are supporting Marley would not agree to that. If you're going to say he's a national icon, then they would want to see either that he is on the same plane as a national hero, or that a national hero status be conferred on him. And so that was what my article was about. It was that we should be careful in terms of how we designate heroes and icons. And if icon is not on par with hero,
then don't give us that.
Don't give him that.
Yeah. And I noticed that you also suggested that the only thing that the current batch of heroes have differently is that they were all not born in the 20th century. So it seems as though that's another barrier that you can't.
Well, I think part of it is due to the fact that if you are going to create new heroes, I think you have issues of politics to deal with. You know,
you mean tribalism?
Political tribalism, we're talking, because, and that's one of the reasons I think people have been reluctant to confer national hero status on anyone who wasn't born a century or two ago, because they don't want to get into the whole cascas that could come from elevating one of their contemporaries. You know, a name that comes up frequently is Michael Manley. Now, how do you do that
without equaling it?
Kind of.
And clearly you wouldn't rush when Bob Marley and Miss Lou cannot be colored in those tribal ways.
I think they are most deserving of that kind of a status, even if you don't want to call them heroes. They're iconic. And I would want to see an icon being on the same level as a hero. I don't have a problem if you don't want to open up the national heroes category. That's fine.
Yeah.
But if you're going to create the icon, then let the icon be of equal stature to the hero.
All right, Clyde. The last question before we seal up is really a personal one. Which is your favorite Marley? And just tell us why. I know that's a hard question. I asked someone today and they say you have to give me 5. I'm going to give you probably 2 or 3 at most.
One of my real all-time favorites is Zimbabwe.
Okay.
And, you know, because of the significance of that song to a particular time I was growing up, and, you know, what it meant to us as conscious youngsters growing up and understanding what apartheid meant, and what was happening in Zimbabwe and what was happening in South Africa and Namibia and all of these places. And Zimbabwe is really a call, it's a call to arms, it's a call to order. You know, I think it's a powerful, very powerful song. I mean, they said there was pandemonium when that song was performed in Zimbabwe,
right.
when he went there in 1980.
Yeah.
And that to me is one of my favorites. Now there's so many of them. I can't remember. Bad Card is one of my favorites, and it has to do with the fact that, you know, I saw my grandfather dancing with an old lady, you know, and it was such a beauty. Bad Card was playing, and he was dancing, and he's such a great dancer, and it is something that stuck to my mind. That's another one. Yeah, but there's so many of them.
Fair enough. There are too many. But I want to ask the audience to please give our honorary lecturer a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jelani.
And you know, the fireside, not as hot as if Professor Cooper had lent us herself, but. All right. Thanks again, Clyde Mackenzie.
When I was asked to do a performance at the Bob Marley lecture, I asked them, I said, why would you need a performance at the lecture? They said to me, you know, we were like an item. And I said to them, well, I am not an item person. And I said, if we're going to do this, let's do something that's transformative. So give me 2 students, or you know, 1 student, 2 students, let's do something. And I met with Jashari, and she's a singer. I was very pleased. I was pleased that she had this R&B and reggae interest and leaning. And then I was introduced to Joel. And when I asked Joel, I said, why are you doing this? And he said, boy, you know, the last time something like this came up, I missed it. I don't want to miss this opportunity. So I'm just going to volunteer and grab it. So I'm very happy that he decided to jump in. And then having met both of them and thinking about it, I thought it would be great to have a bass player. So I reached out to a couple of my contacts and I got Mandela. Now, while we were doing our sound check this morning, a while ago, I said to him, you know, should I apologize for not being Ernest Ranglin? Because he's played with Ernest and the top musicians in the world, and you know, he's spent many years in Europe, and I'm so pleased to have a musician of his caliber on the stand. And then as I started working, thinking about Mandela, I thought, no man, we need some horns. And so I reached out to Top Brass in one of the top horn sections in Jamaica. And they agreed to do it. Now, this is a rendition of Exodus, which is based on an arrangement I have done before, but I have altered it for this presentation. So this has been specially done for this moment. So hope you enjoyed.
if you're not wrong, everything is alright. So we're gonna walk alright through the roads of creation with each generation, trod through great tribulation. Exodus, movement of Jah people. Open your eyes and look within. Are you satisfied with the life you're living? We know where we're going. We know where we're from. We're leaving Babylon and we're going to the fatherland. Exodus, movement of Jah people. We're talking about Exodus, movement of Jah people. Oh, Exodus, movement of Jah people. Exodus, movement of Jah people. Movement of Jah people, movement of Jah people, movement of Jah people. And send another brother Moses. Movement of Jah people, movement of Jah people, movement from across the Red Sea. Movement of Jah people, movement of Jah people, movement of Jah people, movement of Jah people, movement of Jah people. We know where we're going, sing movement of Jah people. And we know where we're from, sing movement of Jah people. Leaving Babylon, movement of Jah people. And we're going to the fatherland, movement of Jah people. Movement of Jah people. Exodus, movement of Jah people. Exodus, movement of Jah people. Exodus, movement of Jah people.
introduce to you Professor Ramoupi. Now, Professor Ramoupi was born in 1967 in Lady Selborne outside Pretoria in South Africa. In that year that he was born, the apartheid government forced removed his family and the community in Lady Selborne, making space for poor whites to settle there. Professor Ramoupi began his academic career at his homeland University of Bophuthatswana in Mahikeng campus in 1987, and in 1989, he relocated to the then University of Natal, Durban campus, a formerly white and liberal university that was renamed University of KwaZulu Natal in the post-apartheid era. He graduated at UND with a BA in History and Political Sciences. He pursued a higher diploma in education and a Master of Arts in History between 1991 and 1999. In January 2000, Professor Ramoupi was employed as a researcher and oral historian in the Heritage and Resources Department of the Robben Island Museum, a former maximum security prison that incarcerated South African, Namibian, and Botswana national political prisoners. For 3 years on Robben Island, Professor Ramoupi, together with the heritage team, interviewed over 500 Robben Island political prisoners, freedom fighters, and some prison wardens who agreed to be interviewed. Ramoupi's research work on Robben Island Museum won him the Ford Foundation International Fellowship to study for his PhD in African Studies and Public History at Howard University in Washington, D.C. He graduated with his doctoral degree in May 2013. At Howard University, Professor Ramoupi was a researcher in the SARAP project, that's the South African Archival Research Project, now renamed the Howard University South African Project. Ramoupi was a senior lecturer at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg for 5 years, where he taught history of education in the School of Education. In September 2022, Ramoupi became associate professor in the Department of History at the University of Free State. He's a Mellon Inclusive Professoriate Fellow. He's a recipient of the 2023 UFS Humanities Excellence Award in Curriculum Development, Transformation, and Renewal. This was awarded in May 2024. Professor Ramoupi is a co-editor of Robben Island and Rainbow Dreams, the Making of Robben Island Museum. And his book, Cultural Resistance, Decolonizing and Africanizing South African History and Heritage and African History. His current research book projects include his 2023-2024 Mellon Fellowship research book project entitled The Centenary History of South African Native National Congress, the African National Congress, through the medium of songs, heritage, culture, and liberation, 1912 to 2012. Miriam Makeba, Mama Africa, the exile years in the United States of America and in Africa. And Bob Marley, Africa Unite, Bob Marley and the African liberation struggles in Africa. He's a member of the advisory board of America's Voices Against Apartheid. Editorial board member of these journals as the African Historical Review and the Black Histories Dialogue and Yesterday and Today. Professor Ramoupi is husband to Rosemary Ramoupi and their parents to 4 sons.
Just want to start.
Prof, we're not hearing you, Prof. I think you're still muted. I'm not sure if you're hearing me, but we have not been hearing you. No? Oh, we could have unmuted him. All right, I'm not sure if you're hearing us, Prof, but we have not been hearing you. So we're going to ask that you begin. He's not hearing me?
I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. So
Where,
my
where
apologies.
do I unmute? Where do I unmute it?
Said.
Okay, where do I unmute it? Can you hear me?
You're good. We're hearing you.
You can hear me? You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will start, right? Okay, I'll start. Greetings. I give thanks to the Most High. I want to start with my praise songs. Nakile malakwa matutu ki motlhako wa batlhako kwa tlhakong. Education, invitation. Thanks to the director of the institute in to Dr. who hosted me as a visiting presence and other ambassadors made families or rather good evening. Good evening at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus, Jamaica, in Kingston. I want to start with my praise songs. Christian Ecology at the University of West Indies, who exercise great deal of patience when his department was my host as visiting scholar in April last year of 2024 at the University of West Indies. At the diplomatic level, I would like to give thanks to the distinguished guests present including ministry officials and African and other ambassadors. The 5 days I spent in Kingston last April 2024, I made families, or rather, I should say, I was accepted as a family member that was still expected to arrive in Jamaica anytime. And I came. My brother, Wint, and his family, Mama Jeanette Morrison and Daddy Morrison, and my artistic brother, Delroy Millwood, and his daughter, Kenya. Thank you for making me feel at home away from home. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how I myself before I go into the lecture. I'm a 57-year-old, born 24 August 1967. Last April, from the 24th to the 30th of April 2024, I was in Kingston, Jamaica. The Department of Eastern Ecology. At the University of West Indies, who exercised great deal of patience when his department was my host as visiting scholar in Mona campus. Mona campus, Jamaica, in Kingston. I want to start with my praise songs. Na Kilema, Lakwa Matutu, Kimotlako, Abatlako, Kwatlako. My name is now Lekgotla Ramoupi. I'm an associate professor at the University of Free State, in Free State province in South Africa. I give thanks to the Most High for this opportunity this evening to be with you in Kingston, Jamaica, visually. I would like to take this opportunity to give thanks to the University of West Indies, Faculty of Humanities and Education in the Institute of Caribbean Studies for their invitation to allow me to deliver this 28th annual Bob Marley lecture. Thanks to the director of the Institute of Caribbean Studies, Dr. Dave Gose, and Dr. Nicole Plummer, lecturer and undergraduate program coordinator, Institute of Caribbean Studies in the Faculty of Humanities and Education at the University of West Indies, Mona, and Western Western Jamaica campus. I'll also want to thank Ms. Onika Young, Communication and Production Consultant. My gratitude is extended to Dr. Julian Kresser, Head of the Department of History and Ecology at the University of West Indies, who exercised great deal of patience when his department was my host as visiting scholar in April last year of 2024 at the University of West Indies. At the diplomatic level, I would like to give thanks to the distinguished guests present, including ministry officials and African and other ambassadors. The 5 days I spent in Kingston last April 2024, I made families, or rather, I should say, I was accepted as a family member that was still expected to arrive in Jamaica anytime. And I came. My brother Wint and his family, Mama Jeanette Morrison and Daddy Morrison, and my artistic brother Delroy Millwood and his daughter Kenya. Thank you for making me feel at home away from home. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how I prefer to introduce myself before I go into the lecture. I'm a 57-year-old, born 24 August 1967. Last April, from the 24th to the 30th of April 2024, I was in Kingston, Jamaica for the first time. My first encounters with this Rasta, Robert Nesta Marley, Bob Marley, was in 1993. I was only 25 years old. That was in Devon, the Ocean City in KwaZulu-Natal, in South Africa, where I was studying for my honors in history at the then University of Natal, Devon campus. These meetings, encounters with Bob Marley were so powerfully overwhelming, but at that time, I guess I took them for granted. There and then I knew I must come to Jamaica, Kingston, to pay my homage to this Rasta, Robert Nesta Marley. For Bob Marley's work of Songs of Freedom came to be a critical reference point for my scholarship, for my writing, researching, teaching, mentoring, and advising, supervision of my postgraduate and undergraduate students in my university work as an associate professor and previously as a senior lecturer at the University of Witwatersrand, based in Johannesburg, where I taught for 5 years, from 2018 to 2022. Let me share some illustrations of my encounters with Bob Marley from 1993 onwards in Devon, South Africa. Mark Ancelotti was my higher diploma in education colleague. He was a white and Italian South African and not rich. He had this 4-CD compilation of Bob Marley Songs of Freedom. I don't remember how he got to borrow this compilation to me, but he did. I played it, and there was just something in the way Marley articulated those words, like so much to say. We've got so much to say right now, and everyone's got the right to decide his destiny in the Zimbabwe song. I could not keep it for longer, but was so grateful that this white boy was so kind to let me have it for a few days. Jabulani Pelago, with whom I was in the graduate class of history for honors and master's degrees from 1995 to 1998 in Devon, happened to have the same 4-CD compilation of Bob Marley's Songs of Freedom. And I guess our Africanness, as African, South African, blacks, if you like, attempting to voice our perspectives as emerging African, South African historian in the Department of History of a previously white English and liberal university, brought us very close. And Jabulani, I call him Africa, was able to lend me have these Songs of Freedom for a longer period, like they were mine. Reading the brief inside the booklet of the biography of Robert Nesta Marley in this CD case was an exposure was a revelation of some knowledge that came to be so intimate in my being, my body, soul, and heart. For my history master's proposal paper, I had written to present in the Department of History to communicate what my MA research was about. When to focus on, I remember I had took the Department of History a proposal paper from one of my students. Their situation, from the song Real Situation, I simply titled my paper, Real Situation, Nation Against Nation. Where did it all begin? Where will it end? Now looking back, I realized how innocent I was writing that and presenting in front of almost all white faculty in the seminar series of the Department of History at the University of Natal, Devon. Innocence, I wrote it in capital letter, and Bob Marley's work are inseparable. That's how I see it, that's how I hear it, and that's how I have come to understand it, to use Marley's word for understanding. My first love is soccer. Please don't tell my wife, Cabo Motuaka. Bob Marley loves soccer, and he will swim in the ocean after a game of good soccer match. I do not see as an accident that it was in Devon, an ocean city, that I came to have my first encounters with Bob Marley. My homeboy, Dingani Mteto, now living and teaching in the United States of America, we will exercise, play soccer, and swim in the ocean at the Devon beachfront every morning before going to campus or to work. Then between the university holidays, I will travel back home in Garangua, a township outside the city of Pretoria, where I was born, just a stone throw from that city in 1967, and where the apartheid government forcefully removed the African and Black community that lived there. Justice Sekgamo Seneke, the former Robben Island political prisoner who were arrested and incarcerated in the Alcatraz of the apartheid state, Robben Island maximum security prison, at the age of 15 years old when he was sentenced to prison. Dr. Moseneke rose above the pettiness of apartheid mindset to become the Deputy Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court in South Africa. He was also born in Lady Selborne. Justice Moseneke graciously wrote the foreword of my book in the midst of his busy schedule. So respect for that. When I got home to my parents for these university holidays, and as I clean our 4-room house, I would play Bob Marley's Songs of Freedom so loud, 3 Little Birds, and I had already started in 1993 to grow my hair into locks. Them call them dreadlocks, they are sacred locks. My mother, Ramoupi, did not tell me, but I heard from my sister, Butumelo Yitu, who lived with our mother and father, Dr. Ramoupi, that my mother was telling her that ngwana wa ka o ile ko university, now he comes home playing this music, meaning reggae, and is he now smoking matekwana, ganja, wisdom weed? She was asking. I laughed so much when I heard that, but that is in the colonization and really apartheid mindsets of how Bob Marley and his generation of reggae music and the hip have been, what's the word? Has been boxed negatively, right? Right there from my own mother, Marley, as time went on, years passed on, and I went back to University Devon and returned and continued to play Songs of Freedom. I will hear that every time at home, 3 Little Birds or One Love songs came on the radio, my mother will stand up and dance to that beat for that reggae. That was, for me, decolonizing the mind and emancipate yourself, to use Nguku wa Thiong'o and Bob Marley respectively. In 2007, Africa Unite, South Africa tour by the Bob Marley Foundation came to South Africa, and I attended. I met Rita Marley, And I remember just talking to her in my African language, right? Which she didn't understand. But that for me, she symbolized us, you know, Africans in South Africa. She looked like us. So that's why I spoke in my language and she could not hear, but was just listening, right? In February 2012, the Jamaica High Commissioner, Ms. Norma Taylor Roberts in Pretoria, South Africa, organized the 50th Jubilee celebration of the independence of Jamaica from Britain. I was a member of the organizing committee for that, including Ms. Shona K. Richards, who's now in the Jamaican High Commission in Tokyo, Japan. A highlight of the celebration was the staging of seminar in Pretoria titled The Role of Reggae Music in the African Liberation Struggle, in which Michael Ibo Cooper, a veteran of the influential reggae band Inner Circle and co-founder of Third World, was part of the celebrations. Contemporaries of Marley, and who is a contemporary of Marley and the Wailers, and Dr. Sonja Stanley, Nia of the University of the West Indies, participated in this in Pretoria, South Africa. From the South African members of that committee, James Mange, a reggae artist who spent 14 years on Robben Island, prison, and where he converted to Rastafari against all odds, joined this committee. Brother James presented about his lived, shared experiences of Robben Island prison and how reggae saved his sanity. I will return to James Mange later in the revolutionary music on Robben Island and how it was so interwoven with Jamaica's reggae music and Bob Marley songs of freedom and other reggae artists. I just want to fast forward now to last year, 2024. 1st of March to 30th of April, 60 days of 2024, I was a visiting associate professor as a Mellon Inclusive Professorate Fellow from my University of the Free State, doing field work and research in USA, Jamaican universities and their archives. I did almost 10 archives, including the Bob Marley Museum at Hope Road in Kingston, Jamaica. That was my last stop from 24 to 30th of April, 2024. The 29th of April, I remember I spent the whole day at the Bob Marley Museum, just trying to inhale everything. I remember just walking in the yard, thinking this is the yard where Bob Marley used to play soccer with his contemporaries, the Wailers, and other visitors. Every flight, ladies and gentlemen, I took, my iPhone has hundreds of photographs, but every one of those flights, when I was in the air, I will open my iPhone and my mother, Ramoupi's photo will appear. This one photo of her always. It was an amazing experience. It told me that my mother was with me. She had passed away in September 2021. Then as I flew out of Washington, D.C. International Airport to Atlanta, where I connected to Kingston, Jamaica, to Norman Manley International Airport, that was my exciting destination. Remember, I said it took me 32 years to realize this lifetime dream, to come to Jamaica to pay my homage to Bob Marley. My mother's photo was replaced on that flight from Atlanta to Kingston by that of this Rasta, Robert Nesta Marley. I have so many photos also on my phone of Bob Marley, but this particular photo of Bob Marley's face just appeared, and it's a picture where he's smiling. It was such an overwhelming feeling. For me, it felt like Bob Marley was welcoming me to Jamaica. That is the only message I take from that encounter. And please don't tell me how to remember my history. Having said all that about my encounters with Bob Marley, I want the audience to know that this this 28th annual Bob Marley lecture did not just fall onto my laps. This is the journey, this is the encounters that I have traveled, and I feel I'm continuing with the message and work of Bob Marley. His work is for humanity. Marley told us in that war song, there's no complexes, superior or inferior, or maybe that is my own interpretation of that song. My intention this evening, ladies and gentlemen, is to speak to this theme and topic of this 28th annual Bob Marley lecture. The topic is revolutionary music and cultural resistance, the power of Bob Marley's songs of freedom on Robben Island maximum security prison in South Africa during the apartheid era, 1960 to 1991. I have 4 themes that makes my entry into this topic this evening. Thursday, the 13th of February, 2025, in Kingston, Jamaica, but it is Friday morning, 14 February 2025 in Johannesburg, when I will be doing this lecture. To be asked to deliver this lecture in the name of this Rasta, Robert Nesta Marley, Bob Marley is the greatest honor of my 57 years old. Let me go to the 4 themes that makes my entry into this topic. So I have 4 themes that makes my entry into this topic for the 20th annual Bob Marley lecture. The first one is the song Rise, You Fallen Fighters, Rise and Take Your Stance Again. This is from the song Heathen from the Exodus album 1977, Bob Marley and the Wailers. Today, ladies and gentlemen, our fallen fighters, South African soldiers who were killed in the DRC, 14 of them, in the DRC, Democratic Republic of the Congo, their mortal remains are being returned to the country of their birth to be honored and laid to rest. But this song, ladies and gentlemen, Heathen by Bob Marley, I use in the last chapter of my book, which is chapter 8, titled Cultural Defiance, Rastafari, Dreadlocks, and Reggae Music. The second point, which is my entry into this topic, is that Bob Marley and the Wailers Zimbabwe independence celebration in April 1980. I was just 13 years old. I didn't know anything about it. Bob Marley hired Boeing 707 plane to bring the equipment from London to Harare, Zimbabwe, single-handedly footing the bill that amounted to 100,000 pounds. I don't know in Jamaican dollars how many millions that would be. And I quote, "No one in history had done that before. It was one of the most extraordinary logistics operations." References to the Chronicles newspaper, 12 April 2013. Marley was so committed. He was emotional about Pan-African liberation. This, ladies and gentlemen, is for me, was Marley's unconditional investment in the liberation of Africa. It is the highest point of Bob Marley's deep commitment to Africa and to African liberation. That is why I wanted to return Marley's journey from next door Zimbabwe in South Africa, my homeland, to travel to Kingston to deliver this lecture in person in Mali's country. I'm deeply saddened that I'm doing this virtually. Point number 3 into this lecture is I read in this book. This book is titled Bob Marley, The Spirit Dancer, published 1994. The third point is, and I quote, Bob Marley was the proudest walking black man I had ever seen. Bob Marley was the proudest walking black man I had ever seen. This is from Thoughts on Time by Bruce W. Talamon in Bob Marley, The Spirit Dancer. I'm going to paraphrase it. Bob Marley was the proudest walking African man I had ever seen. Bob Marley was the proudest walking human being I had ever seen. The fourth point, ladies and gentlemen, is that in April 2024, when I was in Houston doing the archives there at Rice University in Texas, I visited the Buffalo Soldier Museum. I would never have known about Buffalo Soldier, the history of the Buffalo Soldier in the Americas, had it not been this philosopher, this my professor of African and African diaspora history, Bob Marley. One of my PhD students does not call me professor, but he calls me Buffalo Soldier. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the title of my book, I'm sure it has been, the book cover has been circulated. It looks like this. That's the cover. In chapter 1, the title of the book is Cultural Resistance on Robben Island, Songs of Struggle and Liberation in South Africa, Izingoma Zomzabalazo, S13, which is in isiXhosa and isiZulu, African languages of South Africa. Izingoma Zomzabalazo means struggle songs, and S13 means the island. That refers to Robben Island. In chapter 1, Researching Robben Island, this book it's got 382 pages, excluding images, maps, and photographs. And I reference, when I checked, it references Bob Marley 38 times. And I've tried to go to all those pages, and I'm going to try to speak to that for 45 minutes or less, so that we can have more time for discussion, okay? In my introductory chapter, titled Researching Robben Island, I write, at an African diaspora level, the impact of two movements on the struggle in South Africa are examined. The civil rights movement in the United States that mushroomed into the Black Power and Black Panther movements, and the Rastafari movements that gained much currency in the African diaspora, particularly in the Caribbean. What connects the diaspora, ladies and gentlemen, and the Izingoma Zomzabalazo S13, which are struggle songs of Robben Island? The focus of my book is that on the one level, the diaspora freedom struggles influence the struggle in South Africa and vice versa. And on the other level, the songs and the music of Rastafari artists such as Bob Marley and many others that I mentioned in the book impacted the African liberation struggle in general. The freedom fighter turned political prisoners, composers of the genre of reggae on Robben Island, because there were different musicians, who played South African genre of music. But in this case, because when you read the entire book, you read about others, Miriam Makeba, Hugh Masekela, Fela Kuti, the influence they had, what's her name, Nina Simone, I talk about them, right? But because I'm trying to locate Jamaica, reggae, and Bob Marley songs of freedom, I'm trying to focus on the freedom fighters, political prisoners who were composers of the genre of reggae on Robben Island. They communicate in their interviews that they were influenced by Rastafari artists, including Peter Tosh, who sang about and against apartheid. The Rastafari movement was so influential that one freedom fighter, James Mange, converted to Rastafari as an act of defiance against the prison. Against the prison authorities when he refused to cut his hair, which he grew into dreadlocks, declaring that he will not cut his hair until the freedom fighters were released from Robben Island. Just to labor on the Peter Tosh 1977 song, Apartheid, which calls for resistance to exploitation, extraction of precious natural resources, gold, diamonds, and pearl. That's my timer. And the injustice of building prisons, but no schools for black children, no hospital for black people. Right? That's that song of Peter Tosh on apartheid. Still on the subject of Jamaica, ladies and gentlemen, in November 2018, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, designated reggae as an intangible cultural heritage. The entry on UNESCO's intangible heritage list under reggae music of Jamaica notes that whilst in its embryonic state, reggae music was the voice of the marginalized. The music is now played and praised by a wide cross, the music is now played and praised by wide across section of society, including various genders, ethnic and religious groups. His contribution to international discourse on issues of injustice, resistance, love, and humanity underscore the dynamics of the element as being at one cerebral, sociopolitical, sensual, and spiritual. The basic social functions of the music as a vehicle for social commentary and means of praising God have not changed, and the music continues to act as a voice for all. Jamaica's application, ladies and gentlemen, to UNESCO highlights the reggae's contribution to international discourse concerning issues of justice, resistance, love, and humanity. Together, these statements open up the potential to interrogate and explore reggae as a medium for promoting human rights and peace through the everyday resistance, allowing listeners to historicize songs, poems, and what they stand and stood for. Songs, this is my subtitle in the book, in page 297. Songs, our archives. I go again to the Caribbean, and to be exact, to Jamaica, where this music originated, is where I would like to start this discussion on the role of reggae music in the African liberation struggle in the celebration event for the 50th anniversary of the independence of Jamaica from British rule held on 6 August 1962. The singing, ladies and gentlemen, of Nkosi Sikelela iAfrika in the Assembly Hall of the University of West Indies morning on the historic visit of the recently released and most famous political prisoner, Nelson Mandela, accompanied by his then comrade and wife, Nomzamo Winnie Mandela, to Jamaica in 1991, was a rousing occasion. Many academics, white and black, not to mention other staff and students of the university and visitors, were present. While they sang, they all had their fists clenched above their heads and sang this anthem as a sign of their identification with the struggle of the people whose hopes this song and liberation anthem, Nkosi Sikelela iAfrika, represents. Nelson Mandela, the man and woman. Mandela, the man and woman in Nelson and Winnie, respectively, together with Mangaliso Robert Sobukwe and Bantu Steve Biko, symbolize the people's struggle for freedom and liberation in South Africa. Thus, the Jamaican visit by the Mandela family was a must-to-do, as was the Mandela visit to Cuba that same year in July, amongst other visits they made in the diaspora, to thank and acknowledge the people of Jamaica, and in particular their culture of resistance, including Rastafari and the island's special genre of music, reggae. The visit indicated our appreciation for Jamaica's decisive role in the African liberation struggle, including the liberation of Zimbabwe, next door South Africa, and other South African countries. These connections of struggle, ladies and gentlemen, and freedom and liberation between Jamaica and South Africa are identifiable in the study by Carol Leone, titled Exodus, Rastafari, Repatriation and the African Renaissance, in which, published in 2001, in which he writes, in an alleyway in central Kingston, Jamaica, at the juncture of two roads, is a mural painted on a brick wall. A large map of Jamaica is connected by a bridge to a large map of Africa. It is entitled Bridge the Gap of Africa, Nelson and Winnie Mandela. I wish someone can take a picture of that if it's still there and share it with me. Carol Leone's attention to this mural was drawn by Barry Chivanes, who at the time lived near this mural. So, ladies and gentlemen, the power of reggae music is precisely what James Mange, who converted to Rastafari on Robben Island, chose reggae as a medium of promoting human rights and peace through everyday resistance. To historicize songs, his values, and what he stand and stood for. This choice is emphasized by Alex Otino in Reggae and Human Rights Discourses in Africa 2019, when he writes that South Africa's James Mange has exemplified the use of reggae in everyday resistance in Africa. Mange views reggae as a vehicle for resistance and emancipation, and continues to sing and organize reggae events, such as the 2014 Reggae Conference in Johannesburg. His songs include an ode to Oliver Tambo, an African National Congress leader, whose name is the title of the song. This is a good example of musical discourse addressing human rights and peace. Ladies and gentlemen, the Rastafari movement was so influential that Mange, who makes the entire chapter of my chapter, which is last chapter, chapter 8, titled cultural defiance, Rastafari, dreadlocks, and reggae music. His defiance in prison for refusing to cut his hair, which he grew into dreadlocks. He decided he would not cut his locks until the freedom fighters were released and kept to his promise. When he was released from Robben Island on April 27, 1991, as captured on the film in the documentary film The Long Journey of Clement Zulu, Mange was still wearing his extensive locks. They were so long, which in his own words had stood the test of time as a symbol to continue to move to a different terrain of struggle and reaffirm visibly and internally his stand in prison. Ladies and gentlemen, for me, the most important reason why I chose to write this book on cultural resistance on Robben Island and bringing the reggae and Rastafari impact on Robben Island is to record, document, and archive songs that were at the heart of the South African struggle, history against colonialism and apartheid that are in grave danger of being forgotten in post-apartheid South Africa, where so much forgetfulness is willed upon people and where it is much more convenient to forget the past than recall it. The tradition of storytelling in African culture, and especially of song, is slowly disappearing as a result of globalization. And I quote Mampela Rampela here, who argues that, open quote, storytelling is a historical imperative. We cannot successfully navigate uncharted waters without some script to guide us. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Bob Marley's body of work of Songs of Freedom has provided a critical reference point for my book. It is in this value and cost that my humility is immeasurable that I am delivering the 28th annual Bob Marley lecture to honor this Rasta Robert Nesta Marley, Bob Marley. This book, ladies and gentlemen, is an attempt to capture and remind us of that African past of storytelling, which is a historical imperative. The cultural resistance history of the African liberation struggle and its songs symbolize for the African majority in South Africa, to borrow from Mangaliso Robert Sobukwe, the founder president of the Pan-Africanist Congress of South Africa. To borrow from his words, this book represents the right to call our souls our own. I just want to end it here and say that because I don't want to go beyond I don't want to go beyond 50, but in the discussion that we'll have, I'm going to read where I'm comparing Bob Marley's Concrete Jungle song with the songs that were sung on Robben Island, which is about the yearning for love. That Bob Marley talks about, where is the love, you know. This song on Robben Island was sung by political prisoners. This song that I compare with the Concrete Jungle is called Lizzy Lizzy, Standa Sami, which means Lizzy Lizzy, my love. So political prisoners, men only on Robben Island, they were yearning for their wives, they were yearning for their partners, they were yearning for their sisters, for their mothers. And they had that song. At the heart of my book and the importance of using Bob Marley as a critical reference point is that we know so much about the South African liberation struggle on Robben Island, but the idea of how Rastafari and reggae music was able to uplift the political prisoners it's a missing gap. It's a research gap in that scholarship. And my book is filling that gap. So I'm just gonna close it here so that when we have a discussion, we can talk more about how Bob Marley and reggae music affected and also influenced and energized the political prisoners on Robben Island to continue with their struggle. Thank you. in prison. So in that sense, they could play some of the songs of Peter Tosh, Bob Marley, and culture. I hope that answers your question.
Yes,
it's a
it
very
does.
important question.
It clarifies it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Let me ask a following question. I know, for example, in one of our prisons here, there's actually a radio station that the prisoners actually operate.
In prison. So in that sense, they could play some of the songs of.
Okay, so the question I'm asking, was it a parallel thing as well, where they were allowed to run their own radio station and play their own songs? Could you respond to that, please?
No, Dr. Dave, they did not. Different political prisoners were able to form bands. There were different bands. For example, James Manga's band called Whiplashes was one of the famous bands that played reggae music because he taught his students on Robben Island to score and how to play different instruments. So it was in that sense that in the prison, in the prison cells, the corridors, they'll have speakers, and there were particular times that the prison warders will open those speakers so that they can listen to the music. But interestingly, there was a census office that had to, any album, vinyl record that was bought by the political prisoners, the warden had to listen to it and try to see if there's anything revolutionary. And if there was anything revolutionary, they will scratch the groove. If there's something revolution or communist or anything that they think it's political. And in my book, you'll see I have used the real vinyl records that are archives at my archives that are from Robben Island, that the prison warders were able to scratch to remove that. On the other hand, other political prisoners, especially in the 1970s, the Black Conscious movement, they say that it's amazing that some of the reggae songs, reggae vinyl records were able to come into the prison and they had revolutionary and political messages. But the side or a footnote of this is that there were wardens who also, wardens were white, Political prisoners were African and black, meaning Africans, colored and Indians. There were wardens who loved reggae, Some of them will smuggle the reggae LPs or cassettes to give to James Mange. James Mange, because of his dreadlocks, he was called Bob Marley, and his band, the Whiplashes was called Bob Marley and the Wailers. Yeah. I hope I answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. One more question, and I just want to ask you, where can we find your book, Neo? Where, through Amazon?
I will provide the places that you can find this book. It's still in print. So by March, April, I'll be able to communicate with you, Dr. Dave, and the community at West Indies, University of West Indies, where you can find the book. I must say this book is very important because we are trying to show that not all, we're trying to show that the leaders on Robben Island had the support of other ordinary political prisoners. So it was not only about the leadership, but you had people, political prisoners who contributed through their cultural resistance, like in music. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We have one last question, Neo, from the audience.
Yes, thank you. Good night, and thanks for the lecture. Yes, my question is, are there any struggles that South Africa as a nation or as a people, of course, particularly blacks, are facing today? And is there any artist, reggae artist of the day who ministers to you and really resonates with you in some way and has some impact or motivation similar to what Bob Marley had at that time? So whether to the young people or to the mature generation of you, yeah. So is there any artist of today that really empowers and motivates you like Bob Marley did in his time?
Thank you. That's a very important question because it shows the continuity of this genre of music. We were sad when Lucky Dube was assassinated because, you know, he was the famous really reggae artist in South Africa. But his family, his daughter is continuing to play with that band. There are other reggae artists also in South Africa, but not only reggae artists, but also the artists that we can say, the post-1994 artists, the Kwaito artists, they're speaking to the issues of today. And when Benny Spear was here recently, he played in Johannesburg, and he had to go and play in Limpopo because there's a big reggae artist. So we still continue to have that. I'm using this music in my history courses because can you imagine teaching the history of the Cold War and not mentioning war? You know, the speech by Emperor Haile Selassie, you know, so this will continue. This music, I think, is timeless. Thank you.
Thank you, Neo. Could I ask you to give him a hand, please? And Neo, we're going to be moving now to vote of thanks, but we want to thank you on behalf of the department here for your book and for your work, and we hope that we will be able to read it and gain some more knowledge. And the significant point you have made to us this evening is about Rastafarian music, even as a method in our teaching and in our work. And so we want to thank you so very much. At this time, we're going to be asking our graduate student to come and to give vote of thanks.
All right, so it seems like Dr. Gus has so much things to say right now. You know that one? Yeah?
I have so much things to say right now.
All right, so greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging around, both online and in person. And as Bob would always say, one good thing about music, when it hits, you feel no pain. And music brought us together today. Reggae music, a genre of music that liberates the people. So as we bring this 28th annual Bob Marley lecture to a close, it is my distinguished pleasure to extend heartfelt thanks to all who have contributed to making this event a success. First and foremost, we express our profound gratitude to Professor Neo for delivering an insightful and thought-provoking lecture. Your exploration of Bob Marley's influence, not just on your culture, but also on music and political discourse, has deepened our understanding of Bob Marley's enduring legacy. A special thank you to our moderator, Professor Emerita Cooper, whose expertise and passion for reggae scholarship helped to frame today's discussion in such an engaging and enlightening manner. We're also grateful to our distinguished guests, so many of you, but thank you, Dr. Goss, for bringing welcome and also chairing the question and answer portion of tonight's proceedings, to the dean who left us earlier, had to go, but thank you for your support on this initiative, and of course to the Fireside Chat that really spoke about current affairs, spoke about what is taking place in Jamaica, Bob Marley's impact, and what we need to look into in order to give Bob Marley the recognition that he truly deserves. And of course, one of the love the performance, right? It was excellent. Yes? To the musical maestro, Sir Seretsi Small, his team, our students, it was so breathtaking, so good to see our students in the space, doing what they love and what they're passionate about. Yes, and the Edna Manley School students, of course, together, just like reggae music, it brings people together. Yes, and a huge, heartfelt thank you to the team that coordinates, does the behind the scenes, to Bettine, to myself, yeah, me I go pop my collar, to Radhika, to the other members of the ICS and Reggae Studies unit, and of course to our technical operator. Thank you all for making today what it is or what it was. And finally, to Ala Uno, thank you. Thank you so much for coming out, for supporting and enduring legacy. This is the 28th year. That means we're doing something right. To have this 28 years and still counting, and we look forward to seeing each and every one of you, whether online or in person, next year to celebrate the 29th staging of the Bob Marley Lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we thank you, Onika, for your vote of thanks. But Neo, you owe us one. Neo?
Yes.
You owe us a
Yes.
visit. You owe us a visit. So we're looking forward to your coming. All right? So we are putting a challenge to you, that when the books, when in April or so, when the books are out finally, we're going to ask you that you owe us a visit in Jamaica, right? And we're going to talk some more about that. All right? All right, one love. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock in here, they'll be showing some films, reggae in Toronto, or reggae in Canada, and Leroy Sibley's will be here. Will be here, and he'll be talking about making of those small films, reggae in Toronto at 6 p.m. tomorrow evening, right here. In one. Thank you so very much for coming. You've been very gracious. We offer apologies again for all the different issues regarding Wi-Fi and all that. But thank you so much. Have a very good evening. Thanks again. To my sister in Sharon.